Welcome to Records Management 101. In this video, we'll go over the basic concepts and principles of records and information management that you will need to know, as well as how to address privacy and access issues you may encounter. What is a record? Firstly, we must define what we mean when we talk about records. Records are any form of recorded information in any format. This includes both physical and digital media, from emails and PDFs to printed reports and sticky notes. The format and type may differ, but when we say records, you should remember this broad definition. The only thing that this definition does not include is applications or products that produce records. We are not obligated to manage a printer or a word processing program in the same way as the report it produces. Because we do not produce cars, sandwiches, or other physical objects, our records are the only evidence that we have done our job. Therefore, records all need to be managed properly, regardless of their format. In the government of Yukon, records management is governed by several pieces of legislation. Yukon has several laws in place that directly affect how records are managed. You don't need to read these laws on your own, but you should be aware of any requirements that apply to the records in your program area's custody. The law that will have the widest scope is the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or ATIP Act. This act provides our definition of records, but also provides a way for the public to access government information. It also has specific limitations on the use and collection of personal information. These statutes, with very few exceptions, apply to all of YG. The Health Information and Privacy Management Act, or HIPAA, governs the use of confidential health information. It details how this information is accessed, collected, distributed, and utilized by Yukon healthcare providers. These statutes will affect you if you are managing healthcare information. The Financial Administration Act dictates, amongst many other things, the type of records required to be maintained by the government for financial purposes. Similarly to HIPAA, it also controls the disclosure and use of the financial information in our custody. This act primarily applies to corporate and departmental finance employees. Another important component is the Archives Act. This act grants authority to the Yukon Archives to take possession of government records and maintain them for public use. This act also has a broad scope, but mostly affects records officers. Finally, the Government Organization Act, GOA, enacts regulations that assign the responsibility of administering other acts to ministers and their respective departments. It also designates the Cabinet Secretary as responsible for maintaining the records of Cabinet. While the GOA and its regulations do not specifically affect records management, many acts have requirements around what kind of information must be maintained. You should familiarize yourself with the acts your program area has been assigned and manage the records involved with them appropriately. The key takeaway from these laws is to know that records have a level of importance and accountability in government that they do not have in private sector. You play an important role in managing them, which leads us to our next section: how to manage records. As discussed, records are the main evidence of government carrying out activities. You are responsible for securely accessing and managing the records in their care. Records must only be accessed through approved portals and applications. Staff are not permitted to conduct government business on unapproved personal devices, accounts, or programs. Records stored in these locations may be subject to other countries' laws, and we risk losing access or having them distributed without authorization. As far as managing the records in the government's custody goes, all records fall into two general categories. The first category is substantive, or official records. These records provide evidence of the government making decisions, implementing policy, spending money, or any other action it takes. A proper collection of substantive records provides context of the actions and decisions of a government, providing a complete picture of the process that went into them. All substantive records have policies that govern them. These policies are known as records retention schedules. They govern when records become inactive, how long they are retained, and what happens after that time elapses. Each program area will have at least one or potentially several schedules that apply to their records, but most employees won't need to know the exact schedule that covers their records. The important thing to know is that substantive records have specific requirements around them, and employees are not permitted to destroy substantive records. Transitory records, by contrast, don't have any of these requirements. These records either only have temporary value or don't provide a source of evidence of government activities like substantive records do. If a record does provide this evidence, but that evidence is also represented in the final product, that record can be considered transitory as well. Transitory records include previous drafts of the final product or deliverable, temporary information such as notifications or FYIs, third-party publications and unsolicited mail, convenience copies, and exact duplicates of records. This is not an exhaustive list, but the important requirement is that staff are making a conscious choice about what records are transitory and which are substantive. To effectively manage their records, staff have to determine which records provide evidence of their program area's activities and which do not. Transitory records should be destroyed by staff when they are no longer needed to reduce clutter. Substantive records must be filed and maintained by the program area. Now that we covered these general categories, we will discuss some of the specific duties you may perform. Access and privacy. Because staff play a key role in managing records, you must be aware of the legislative requirements in two key areas: maintaining private information and responding access to information requests. Personal information is any information that directly identifies an individual, such as name, address, or SIN. It also includes anonymous data that, when collected together, allows for the identification of specific individuals. Staff must manage any personal information in their department's custody and ensure that it is not improperly accessed or disclosed. Staff are responsible that any use of personal information is in line with their departmental policies, as well as keeping it maintained in a safe and secure manner. It is an offense under the law to intentionally access or disseminate personal information in any improper manner. The other major duty revolves around access to information. Access to information, or ATIP requests, are queries from the public for access to information the government has. If you receive an ATIP request, you will need to provide all responsive records in your custody, regardless if they are substantive or transitory. Records with personal or other confidential information must also be included. All records collected will be reviewed before being released to the public, and most sensitive information will not be released. If you have concerns or need help with collection, please speak with your records officer. We've now covered the major roles and responsibilities of records management, so let's move to something more fun. Here's how you can dispose of records so that you don't have to manage nearly as much. Disposal. For transitory records, disposal is quite simple. Once you have decided that they are no longer useful or needed, they are good to go. For digital records, they can simply be deleted or moved to the recycle bin and emptied. Any paper records are to be put in the gray shred bins in your office. These bins are picked up weekly and then securely shredded, ensuring that any sensitive information is destroyed. Because substantive records provide evidence of government activities, they must be maintained by the program area and cannot be destroyed without prior authorization. Talk to your records officer if you want to get rid of substantive records. Best practices. As an employee of the Yukon government, we all play a role in managing the records in our care. These best practices will help you keep everything organized and on track. The most important piece to make sure you understand is the difference between substantive and transitory records. Talk to your records officer and make sure you know where records must be filed and what is expected to be kept as substantive. They can also help provide training and other supports. The second priority is to make good records habits early. Take 5 minutes a day or 20 minutes at the end of the week. Clean up the transitory records, especially in your email, and make sure you're filing your substantive records appropriately. Emails are the biggest source of clutter, so make sure you're checking both your inbox and sent folder. Finally, communicate. Talk with your colleagues to make sure you're clear who's doing the filing on collaborative projects, common repositories, and who's managing your area's unique repositories like SharePoint sites. If anything is unclear or you need additional help with records management, make sure you talk to your records officer. They are your primary resource for all things records management. Thank you for taking the time to view this introductory video on records management basics. We hope to see you in the next one.